Hi, I'm Zeke with the Sonoran Desert Institute, and here at SDI, we're extremely proud to be sponsors of the Hickok 45 channel. You may be asking yourself, well, what is SDI? SDI is an affordable, fully accredited distance learning education program. We have an emphasis in gunsmithing and firearms technology. If you decide to become a gunsmith, you'll need to learn proper gunsmithing techniques, and while some people will use an apprenticeship program to gain these techniques, a formal education will ensure an organized, more comprehensive learning environment. But when you choose a gunsmithing school, it's still kind of difficult. So it's very important that you choose a gunsmithing school that meet the following criteria. First, look for a nationally or regionally accredited program. And whether distance learning online or through a brick and mortar ground program, a gunsmithing program should always have a hands-on element. And finally, make sure you look for a school with high student satisfaction. Find reviews online, check out its Facebook or other social media, or get on the same social media sites, find some alumni, and ask to speak with them about their experience. And while we're not at SDI today, I do have some of the firearms I've learned to work on and build myself through the SDI program. So let's go take a look at them. Okay, maybe not. We'll just get seriously. Can I not get a chair that fits me? I'm a big guy, dude. So I guess back to what we were originally talking about. Above all else, find the school that's right for you. It's not always going to be the distance education programs or the brick and mortar ground schools that are for everybody. Just make sure you do your research on multiple options before you make that decision. But if you want more information on our gunsmithing school, just go to www.sdi.edu or call us at 1-800-336-8939.
All right, welcome back to the show. And today we've got Adam Kokesh on. And I have to say, some people listening to this right now won't be excited about that.
You mean they're not interested in having their beliefs challenged in any way whatsoever? Well, then you should probably tune out at this point.
I mean, yeah, but they're all right. So, I mean, come on.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah. I'm here because I'm known for being right about everything.
Well, I mean, they're right. That's why they're angry at you. But... okay, so I think the two big things that people have a problem with that you've done, or not done, but been a part of, whatever, as far as in the gun community, is one, the March on Washington after Sandy Hook, which never happened. I know you
as a one-man march, you could say.
Okay, I know that was that something fell through about that, but that was a big controversy. We can tell the story
if you want. Yeah,
go ahead. You tell.
Well, it was just early 2013 when the gun rights conversation was just starting to really heat up in the United States, and there were so many people online, and I looked at the gun community. I looked at, for me, more the freedom-oriented community, right. And I saw that there was a demand that people were talking a big game. They wanted to step up, and I had a lot of friends who had done open carry activism before. I was an open carrier when I lived in New Mexico, and I carried a Smith & Wesson 358 revolver on my hip. People thought I was an off-duty cop, but an armed society is a polite society, and in the Southwest, there's at least an acceptable culture of it. So I was treated very well, open carrying there. Yeah. And I have friends in Texas, the guys from Come and Take It, who are gave me armed escorts last time I did speaking events after all this went down, and I wasn't able to carry a firearm myself. And we said that if we got 10,000 people on a Facebook event page who said that they were willing to do a civil disobedience open carry walk through Washington, D.C., that we would do it, that I would organize it, that I would lead the route, that I would plan the coordination with law enforcement. And a month and a half before that, I was at a marijuana rally in Philadelphia. And because I had no marijuana on me, I was keeping my arrest risk very minimal because we had this armed march coming up and we were getting ready for it. Although even then it looked like it was uncertain if we were going to make our target for numbers. And someone in front of me was smoking marijuana, and a United States Park Police officer went to go arrest him. And while he did that, he brushed past me, like give me a little shoulder bump as he was pushing past people in the crowd. And maybe because he has very sensitive feelings, being a federal law enforcement officer, you never know. Right. And he charged me with assault and came back with 3 of his buddies and tried to tackle me for being bumped into. So it was kind of an obvious setup, like, well, maybe it has something to do with this armed march that he's organizing. And one of the things that I was underprepared with the armed march was having, a committee or having a team. We had people on board for various functions, but I didn't have enough people on board at the planning level that if something happened to me, it could go on without me. And that was a weakness that whoever was behind my arrest in Philadelphia knew. And while I was in jail, they put us in solitary, myself and N.A. Poe, who was the other the co-organizer of this event. Really the main organizer with the Panic Hour in Philadelphia. And they put us in the same cell in isolation, and then he got released. And they tried to release me on bail, and they said one of the conditions of bail is that you can't own a firearm. And now before I explain what happened, because this is the really cool part of the story, is that I canceled the march while I was in jail. And I realized that it would not be responsible of me to call for this if I wasn't in a position to organize it responsibly.
And have other people do it. And
right. If I had those redundancies built in, if we had the momentum even, and we really didn't, frankly, it was kind of sad to see that all of the people who were on the internet saying, yeah, how dare they take our guns? If they even sneeze at a bill about taking away our guns, we're going to storm the Capitol kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the rhetoric of that time. And most of those guys were like, oh, you actually want to hold us to that. You actually want to give us an opportunity to stand up and do that and engage in civil disobedience to stand up. Well, we're not that serious.
Yeah.
And it was really disappointing to feel that from people that I thought that the gun issue at that point was really bringing a lot of people together. I mean, even people from the left who are pro-gun rights were like, yeah, we need to stand together on this singular issue because it really is fundamental to our relationship with government. To libertarians and anarchists who are like, yeah, absolute right to self-defense. To the broader body of gun rights enthusiasts in America. I should say firearms enthusiasts, because most of them don't care about gun rights. And it's really sad. I think this exposed that. But they're, by and large, conservatives.
Right.
And I make the distinction here to say that they care about having guns for themselves. They want to be able to play with guns. They want to be able to defend themselves. They believe in that freedom for themselves. But do they really care about the rights associated with that? Yeah. The fundamental right to self-defense as you see fit? No.
Like the FUDs you're talking about, basically, is like the term the gun culture uses.
Right.
Yeah, like the guy, Farmer John, he's got his shotgun, but those black rifles with 30-round magazines, who needs those?
Yeah, right. And they don't get the principles. And if the government comes, they're going to bend over. And it's really sad to see that that's what happened. So when I called it off from in jail, I didn't even get to see all of the reaction. But a couple days later, they tried to release me on bail and said I couldn't own a firearm. But I was still ready to do this armed march if we had 1 month to go, if there was a big groundswell of support, if people had come in and said, no, Adam, we really want to organize this, we want to keep this going. If people had stepped up, then I wanted to certainly be there. I didn't want to give up my right, even temporarily, to own firearms. And I said, really? I don't accept your bail conditions. Sorry, you can lock me back up. You got 100 days to try this case.
Yeah.
Good luck. You want to embarrass yourselves? Keep going. You want to charge me with assault for being bumped into? And by the way, there's video of this very clear. You want to charge me with assault for being bumped into by one of your officers?
And what does guns have to do with that, anyways?
Right. Because I'm so dangerous, because I have a trial pending that I have to give up my right to self-defense. Yeah. So I said, no, lock me back up. I'll go back to my cell right now. And the next day, they ordered the charges dropped. And the officer who booked me, who was like such the smug jerk, typical guy who's who had to write the arrest report. And at my pretrial hearing, I had a good public defender there. He had to take the stand to show probable cause, and my attorney wanted to challenge it. And he just, oh my gosh, picked his statement apart because he wasn't even there to see what had happened. Yeah. And so they already knew that the case was bogus. But he came at me to release my property, right? Like my suit jacket and my belt and the stuff I had in my pockets and my wallet. And it was only half of it. The other half I had to go pick up at another station. But he gives me this half of it, and he goes, by the way, here's 2 tickets. Sign these tickets. And it was like unlawful assembly and then interfering with a public officer. I was like, no. Really? You think you're putting this in front of me like if I don't sign these, you're not going to let me out of jail. Good luck with that, because I know there's a judge's order behind what's happening right here that is over your head.
Yeah, that's petty.
And I said, you really, you're going to send me back to jail because I'm not going to sign these two, $200 or whatever it was citations. Be my guest. And they let me out without signing them. So that was very nice. But then, when it came time to do the armed march, I wanted to, I honestly, it was a lot of it was driven by, well, I have to show people that it's not because I back down. And in a way, that's kind of an ego self-preservation thing for me to say, no, really, it's not. And part of this was a great thing for me to raise the issue in the gun community. Like, you're a lot of talk. Most of the guys out there, even the ones who aren't FUDs, who claim to be not FUDs.
Well, I think a lot of people in the gun culture, and I'll admit I was one of these, thought that it was a little bit too much because the situation felt precarious. Like it needed to be handled very delicately, but in the right way. And a lot of people felt like maybe that was a little bit too far, that maybe that was going to make gun people look bad, possibly. That was kind of, the way it felt at that time. And of course, it was a really weird time, so it's hard to talk about it out of context almost. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because it was
things have calmed down a little bit.
Yeah, they have a lot. But it was a really crazy time. So it was just,
Well, I can understand in any individual, and I've done a lot of civil disobedience. I mean, most people know me from dancing at the Jefferson Memorial and getting body slammed, choke slammed, and kneed in the ribs by a cop there. I did a lot of civil disobedience with Iraq Veterans Against the War, and that was really what introduced me to a lot of the organizing principles. And bringing it to firearms is a whole different level of risk, certainly. But I've done open carry before. I've done open carry demonstrations before this. It was just, all right, we're going to take it to the next level. We're going to do it in DC. Yeah. And the charge, you're going to make gun rights activists look bad. What, by doing what other gun rights? I mean, you're not complaining that they're doing in Texas. You're not complaining that they're doing in Arizona.
Well, actually,
or some people are complaining. Okay, fair enough. There are consistent people who are always afraid of anything controversial. So yes, I'll hand it to them. But if you say that the risk is not right for you, I can appreciate that. That's totally fine. And I will never hold it against someone for not willing to get arrested for my cause. That's really a kind of emotional bullying to say you're wrong because you're not willing to take the exact same risk as me. Hey, you got a job that people depend on you for, that more people get benefit out of than you getting arrested. You have family members, you have kids who depend on you. Fine. Those are all reasonable reasons to not participate in high-risk civil disobedience. But when you understand that the purpose is standing up for our fundamental right to self-defense, our right to own you don't need the Second Amendment. You don't need a right to own guns because you have a right to own yourself as a human being. You have a right to own property, and you have the right to defend yourself how you see fit. Words on paper don't give you that. Those are inherent rights that we enjoy as human beings.
Yeah, and that's the whole point of the Bill of Rights is it's supposed to remind us of what we already have.
Exactly.
People seem to forget that sometimes.
And just to be able to stand up for that when everybody else is saying, no, we're gonna donate to the NRA and we're gonna call our congressman. Well, guess what? How's that been going for us? How have gun rights been as a result of that activism? Yeah. Has it really been helpful to keep, electing Republican congressmen and senators who are pro-gun? No. And the problem is that we've forgotten the spirit of the founders of this country, which is, no, when they pass an unjust law, you just don't obey it. You don't say, oh, well, there's a risk I might get arrested. Oh, well, that we're just going to argue about this. We're just going to keep going with our lobbyists. No, that doesn't work. And, maybe you can argue with the particular strategy that I took on. You can argue with its effectiveness, but you can't argue with the fact that gun rights activism in America over the last few decades has been, if anything, counterproductive. And I would say that if you're donating to the NRA, If that's your answer as a gun rights activist, I'm going to donate to the NRA. I'm going to show up to a monthly meeting. I'm going to watch a podcast like this or listen to people talking about guns. And you never stand up. I'm sorry, you're the one making gun rights activists look bad because you make us look scared, sad, and pathetic. I
mean, we should definitely give money to organizations that we feel like are helping the
Absolutely.
Second. But almost one of the better things that you can do is just not be afraid to talk about it. even if you don't have an audience, on social media, like we do, just amongst your friends, people that people that you work with, you know what I mean? Just like represent it in a positive light the best you can.
Absolutely.
But also I think that is where some people had a problem with some of the stuff you did, where it seemed extreme to them, like it was going to turn off people instead of invite them to be interested in guns. But
well, you can say that it's an extreme if you accept the government standard of behavior.
Right.
If the norm is obedience, if the norm is following all the rules no matter how unjust they are, then yes, disobedience is extreme. But if you think that we have come to an extreme point of obedience, and I would say that we have historically as a country, we have come to a sad state of extreme obedience, then yes, by that measure, standing up and being disobedient is extreme. I would say that should be the norm.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's almost sad that, like, in the context of everything that was going on, it made sense to me at the time, and I think maybe it still does, that maybe that might have been a little bit too far. But I will also say that it's also sad that it did seem like it was too far. You know what I mean?
If it's too far, you got to answer some other questions about what's wrong.
Like, it's like one of those things where, crazy depends on how many people are doing it. Right? It seemed crazy because you were the only guy doing it.
Well, and then it really was just me in the end. And if I may finish the thought earlier, it was that I realized, aside from proving to everybody out there, it wasn't because I was chickening out, because the government didn't scare me by arresting me, but that we were able to accomplish most of the goal of the open carry march, which was to force the issue in Washington, D.C. And I don't get a lot of credit for it, but since then, gun laws in D.C. have changed significantly, and there have been several steps in legalization of open carry and firearms rights in general in Washington, D.C. Of course, Dick Heller versus D.C. was before my case. It was a very seminal one. Since then, Heller has come out in support of my work, which I take as from the guy who made that case happen. Right. To say that I had his support was so important to me, and I think even by myself with what I was able to do, and you know the story how my home got raided and they threw a flashbang grenade in and roughed me up and ransacked my home, and then I ended up having a little 4-month government-induced, taxpayer-funded spiritual retreat in D.C. Well, hey, come on! It was a very secure, gated community.
That's right.
Meticulously manicured lawns with 24-hour security. So I really did enjoy my time. I got to think a lot, and I did enjoy the experience. But the effect was that it raised the issue. It forced the issue. Like I really was disappointed, and now I see that. It takes a different kind of person, and I hope we get a chance to get into this more, but it takes a different kind of person to really stand up for gun rights. And it's not someone who just wants their guns or wants freedom for themselves. It takes someone who understands freedom as a moral concept, as a philosophical principle, someone who's willing to stand up for that in all its forms and see that it's not about winning arguments anymore. This has been an important evolution in my thinking. And one of the things that I learned from this incident in particular was that it's not enough to win debates. It's not enough to win arguments. It's not enough to raise awareness about issues. And I don't care if you're an extreme conservative even, or an extreme liberal who needs and I mean like the Tea Party versus the Green Party versus libertarian types that are clearly so far divergent from mainstream statism of the Jeb Bush, Hillary Clinton variety, that you got to understand that if you see a different world possible, whether it's one in which your concept of, we get back to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights is respected, or, communities are able to develop locally harmoniously, or simply that as a libertarian like myself would say, the right of the individual is held up as sacrilege, as the highest political value, that you own yourself and all human interactions should be free of force, fraud, and coercion, except when you're able to defend yourself. So you have to understand that if you want to make the world a better place based on any of those ideas that are divergent from central control or tyranny, whatever it is, and I don't mean this to say in a cheesy way of we all got to stick together. No, but all of us who care about that have to understand that we need to win converts. We need to win converts to a different way of thinking. Whether it's your way of thinking or mine doesn't matter. But to break people away from letting government do the thinking for them. And that's the critical thing that has influenced my evolution, which is why I wrote the book Freedom, and which is why I'm here today, that we're on a national tour, the American Campfire Freedom Tour, also known as the Adam Kokesh Avoids His Probation Officer Tour.
Yeah, I'll put links to all that in the description. So, yeah, I mean, I definitely agree, and I think that sometimes the government's, the propaganda really that they put out against guns, even for people who like guns, it has an effect. I think
makes you afraid.
I think it has an effect on all of us. It makes you. You start to think about like reasonable restrictions whenever they say they say things like instead of realizing that pretty much all gun control is unreasonable, you start thinking like, well, it's reasonable for me to have these certain things, but I guess like it's kind of unrealistic to think that I could just go and buy a machine gun.
And this is the problem with people who don't understand freedom as a principle. Well, it's reasonable for me to have a handgun and a shotgun and a rifle, and I've got my kit, and as long as I've got that, I'm cool. Anything more than that is unreasonable. And if it's unreasonable, I don't care if government goes and violates those people's rights. Like, wait a second. What if someone else decides that, no, just the handgun is the only reasonable thing and shotguns and rifles are unreasonable now? Your standard of reasonableness is not an excuse to use government to impose any of your standards on someone else.
Right. Because everybody has their own different idea of what reasonable is. If reasonable to you is a shotgun in your house and that's it, fine. Reasonable to you is a M60 in your house, fine. You know what I'm saying? Like,
as long as it stays on your property,
yeah,
you should be able to do whatever you want.
Exactly. There's already crimes against violence. You know what I'm saying? There's already laws in place.
Yeah. Wait. You mean it doesn't work? We didn't like end the problem of murder when government made murder illegal?
Yeah,
it wasn't like the war on drugs where we made pot illegal and everybody stopped smoking pot? Remember that miracle?
People smoke pot? I thought that was illegal.
No. It doesn't happen in America anymore.
No,
it's illegal.
It doesn't.
Only in Colorado and Oregon.
Yeah, it's only.
I mean, in Washington State. Oh, and Oregon now, and a lot of other states. But no, other than that, nobody smokes marijuana and nobody does cocaine or acid or anything else because those drugs are illegal.
Yeah, exactly. And it's crazy. Here's something the left would say. They'd be like, "Oh yeah, we can't stop murder, so let's not make that illegal." The difference is you're talking about a crime against a person.
Yeah, a real crime.
Yeah, a crime.
No victim, no crime.
Right. It's crimes against people and property. Things like identity theft, or just theft, burglary. Nobody wants to have their house broken into and their stuff stolen. Like, those are serious crimes. That is not what freedom applies to. It doesn't apply to getting to do what you want to somebody else. Freedom is your own
limited
body.
by the respect for the rights of others.
Right, exactly. One thing I like to talk about is how the whole concept of freedom, it's a very it's such an internal thing inside. I mean, it's a very it's hard for some people, I think, to understand on a purely human level. Because our concept of freedom, because of how our system is set up and established, we tend to think of it in a very material sense. Right. Like, I have freedom and I can go to this place, or I can have this thing, or I can have this much of this thing, or do this much of that thing. But really, none of that is freedom, really. To me, freedom is strictly your mental process. If you consider yourself a human being, yes, you might live in a certain part of a planet that is located in a certain area that has certain laws that maybe some of them make sense for all of us to get along. You start to get things like nationalism and things like that, to where you stop becoming a human and you start being like part of the system. You know what I mean? If that makes sense.
Yeah, no. What you really touched on there, what I think you're really getting at, is the way that the word itself has been perverted in America,
right, exactly.
And it's so sad. And you know what? I mean, I'll lay this on conservatives even. because it really is conservatives who claim to believe in freedom, and they've perverted that inherent beautiful human drive to be free, to have your own will respected, to not have violence used or threatened against you in any way. I mean, hello, kind of universal on that one, right?
Exactly.
And it's turned into, instead, freedom is something that I have for myself. And it's fine. You can say that you're free if no one is aggressing against you, if you're able to live, if you never bump into the walls of your bubble, if you never push the limits, if you're happy living in a conservative way and you never take new risks and you never make bold life decisions, and people say, that's not conservative. I mean, in all the general sense that we see in the culture, then you might say, well, as long as my bubble is preserved, I don't care how many brown people you kill on the other side of the planet. I don't care how many victims there are of police brutality. I don't care how many victims of the welfare state there are. I don't even care that I have to pay 50% of what I earn as the average American in taxes to the government, because I can still afford all the toys that I want here, and they'll let me play with them. And that is such a perverse view of freedom, because it's not freedom at all. It's a certain level of material satisfaction, and that has been conflated with freedom, which is a principle
and a mindset. Freedom is more like a mindset, not so much a physical ability.
Well, you can define it in a lot of ways. Specifically socially, freedom is the absence of coercion, when you have that state of nobody threatening each other with force or violence or using it to violate anyone's rights. And the beautiful thing about this is that it works from the individual perspective and the collective perspective. Not the collective necessarily, but in the relationships. And it satisfies both perspectives on what it means when you adopt it as a principle. Because the people who say, I want freedom for myself, well, guess what? It's founded in self-ownership. As a human being, you own yourself. You own your body. No one can take that away. As a result, anything that you produce, you own. As a product of your labor, your legitimately acquired property, anything that you trade for with that. But on the other perspective, the other lens of analysis, you could describe the exact same thing without even mentioning the rights of the individual, and simply say that all human relations, the way we relate to each other, should be voluntary, should be free of force and coercion. And that way nobody is violating the rights of others.
Right.
And you're saying the exact same thing. But most conservatives, really most Americans, but especially conservatives, and it's
even on the left, they all want their
freedom
own
is
brand
defined
of
materialistically, right? Freedom from want. When it's funny, because Republicans or conservatives, they'll make fun of liberals and say, no, freedom doesn't mean you have freedom from hunger and someone's going to feed you. That's socialism. Well, guess what? When you say you want freedom from being invaded, and you're willing to have socialized defense, you're willing to have socialized public services, you're willing to have a socialized system of imposing your preferences on other people, you're just as much a collectivist.
Yeah, exactly. And it's sad how like you said, the misuse of that term allows the just gigantic system that we live in to continually just take it away.
Well, I'll go even further with this. My gateway to the message of freedom was the Libertarian Party. And it started when I was in high school, and they said, you're going to vote soon. Do you want to be a Republican or Democrat? And I said, whoa, wait a second. You mean I have to be totally lame? I don't have a choice? Yeah. And they were like, well, there's this other option. And it was like a used car dealer taking you to the back corner of the lot.
Yeah.
Like, well, back here we've got this thing that's, I don't know what we call it, but it looks like this, and we don't know what happened in the back seat, but you could drive it off the lot probably. It's called the Libertarian Party. And I was like, oh, leave me alone. Yes, sign me up. So that was, I didn't know what it meant. And even the Libertarian Party, which came out of this beautiful philosophy that was really codified by Murray Rothbard in the 70s, became perverted by the Koch brothers in a way. David Koch, who ran he was an LP VP nominee. And a lot of people inherently who first got freedom as a principle got scared and said, well, let's present this as a political idea. We're not really against the existence of government. We want some control by violence, but, we just want to be socially liberal, fiscally conservative. And so I joined the Marines. And nobody who understands the nature of government, who understands the true nature of freedom, goes, okay, and now I'm going to go sign up to kill for politicians.
Yeah.
If you want, just as a student of American history, even not even as a philosophical libertarian, when you understand that the founders were against a standing army because it was the greatest threat to liberty, why would you support that policy? I mean, being a conservative saying I believe in freedom, therefore I'm going to join the military, is the same as a conservative saying I believe in freedom, therefore I'm going to become an IRS agent and tax the hell out of everyone. It's just as much a moral, logical, philosophical contradiction. So I went and joined the Marines, and I volunteered to go to Fallujah in 2004, and coming back and got in trouble for bringing a pistol back the first time as a little souvenir.
A gold-plated one, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, not quite gold-plated. It had little gold medallions on the pistol grips and had an engraving on the slide rail that said it was a gift presented from Saddam Hussein.
Yeah.
So it was a Beretta 9mm modified with a single column magazine chamber.
So single stack?
Single stack Beretta 9mm. So it was very similar to the service weapon that I carried, just, a narrower model. And I got in trouble with that when I got back. So I spent, when I was supposed to go back to Iraq, a year managing barracks and mowing lawns as a sergeant with combat experience who spoke Arabic, who was about to get a medal, a Navy Commendation Medal, the day before they busted me down. And that had me just disgruntled enough when I got out to really start questioning things. And so when I came across the website for Iraq Veterans Against the War, I just knew that I had to be a part of it. And that was my start in activism. But it was talking to other veterans who I knew were good dudes, who were just genuine dudes. And we had these political conversations, driving around to events that came down to matters of opinion. And I really wasn't happy with that. I mean, as a libertarian, I knew I was right about everything. I just had to prove it.
Right.
And that led me to seek out the deeper philosophical answers. And I didn't want, I was unsatisfied with like, if there are two people in a room who are genuinely interested in serving humanity, in making the world a better place. And all these guys were literally risking their lives. I mean, this is when the Iraq War, just recently, Mitt Romney came out and said the Iraq War was a mistake. Jeb Bush had to backpedal on that.
Yeah.
But back then, when I was saying it in 2007, everybody was freaking out. It was
really controversial at that time. Yeah.
We got death threats.
Wow.
And it's from the same guys, who are pro-military but pro-freedom. And it's like, no, I'm sorry, you can't be pro-military and pro-freedom.
Yeah.
You can't be pro-freedom and pro-cop.
Well, just that whole thing, like Bush coming on TV and saying, they hate our freedom. That doesn't even make sense.
Right.
But at the time, it made perfect sense for some reason.
Well, to enough people for them to get away with what they got away with. I don't think it ever made sense.
No. It didn't ever make sense. But it's like, what's cool, that organization actually was one of the first things that kind of really got me thinking. I was in high school at the time, and I remember seeing something on the news about, I don't know if you were a part of them back then or not. It was probably around 07, something like that. And I remember seeing a bunch of them speak and stuff, and I was like, interesting, veterans against the war. It was the most mild form of I
gotta figure this out and raise a little cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, but that's how it starts. And I started thinking about it. Maybe there's not something right about this. And I started looking into it and thinking about it more. And yeah, it makes sense. It's so we're going to war with these people because they supposedly have some kind of cultural issue with our way of life. It's really they're going to do all of that because of our culture all the way over here. It's something doesn't seem right. Maybe I could see a few extremists maybe, but going to war with an entire country, and then wait a minute, I thought September 11th, that whole thing was about Afghanistan.
Too many leaps.
What's going on here?
Well, and if you're pro-gun, even I volunteered to go to Fallujah in 2004 with the civil affairs team because I was against the war before the war. Actually, I went to the day of student walkouts. I was a reservist in college at the time. And I didn't have this principled perspective. It was just, this doesn't add up. Okay, and at the time, remember, everybody was like, okay, Afghanistan makes sense. Terrorists are in Afghanistan, fine. But then it was Iraq, and there was a big question of just, wait a second, is this going to be worth it? And I said, no, absolutely not. But I still bought the propaganda of, then we got to go clean up our mess. And it was a big disillusionment for me to say, all right, we're going in civil affairs. We're the ones who are actually the tip of the spear leading the charge to rebuild. And then No, it's you're like a second thought after infantry. I mean, like an afterthought of the occupation. And if you're pro gun rights, you have to be pro gun rights for everybody. You know, I mean, maybe there's some standard. Okay, fine. You want people who have passed a background check. I disagree, but okay, at least fine. Whatever. You've seen there's some guns are good because people have the right to defend themselves, and a society that respects that right is going to be better off. Well, why the heck are you supporting a war in Iraq where we're imposing gun control left and right? And that really bothered me too when we were there, even in civil affairs, just being part of that process where, well, you know, no one's allowed to own guns now. If guess where open carry is really illegal, where the American army will shoot you if they see you with a gun.
Yeah.
That's not a gun-friendly society.
And what place are you going to need guns more than a place where you have all these different
Social
rebels
chaos,
going all over the place? You know?
Yeah. So what were we doing? We were we were helping the rebels and the insurgents and the people that were really enemies of the people, some of whom were friends of the people, saying, let's get rid of this occupation so that we can get back to self-determination here. But I mean, even the real, I mean, I know I'm not supposed to curse, but we were like just.
No,
I mean, the biggest heads out there who are just like, no, we want to take advantage of this situation to rape and pillage.
Yeah.
We help them by disarming everyday Iraqis.
Yeah. That's one thing that's frustrating is like when me and Dad, the Hickok 45 thing, we hear from a lot of people in other countries and stuff like that. And you hate to hear how insanely eroded their gun rights are. You know, we think it's bad here. With them trying to ban, magazine capacity and, all
nibble
this kind
around
of stuff.
the edges by comparison.
Yeah. But man, over there, it's just insane.
England.
Yeah. And it's like, and I run into this all the time. Like my wife always talking about she wants to go to Europe and stuff like that. And it's like, I don't know.
Sure?
I'm not crazy about traveling to other countries because all of a sudden now I'm just unarmed. I can't take guns over there. So it's like it really makes it feel like a completely different world. And at least I think for Americans, at least pro-gun Americans, that almost adds to the kind of the distance, feeling of like separation between the other countries and all this kind of stuff. And it'd be awesome if there could one day be a world where all countries could have guns, like individual gun rights. Just think of how much better off so many countries could be if individuals had guns. You wouldn't have these militants just sweeping through Africa and just slaughtering people and all this crazy stuff that happens. You know what I mean? It wouldn't happen.
You hit on something so important there, how they make you afraid of the outsider. And I can tell you this from personal experience. You know what they had to do over the course of the development of major modern warfare to get people to pull the trigger, right? In World War I, you've seen the test, right, or the statistics where it was a very small percentage of people that actually pulled the trigger.
Oh, they like changed the targets to look more like humanoid.
That was part of the conditioning, right? And then for World War II, they were able to up it. And then for Vietnam, they introduced, well, even in World War II, there was a lot of racist propaganda, right? Krauts and slant eyes.
Yeah.
And in Vietnam, all the derogatory language that was used against the Vietnamese, it was the same thing. But hey, we don't learn the lessons. I mean, Mark Twain said history doesn't repeat itself, but it certainly rhymes.
Yeah.
I think it spirals. I think we make progress, but we see certain patterns repeat. And for me, in the conditioning that we experienced, even though, well, they had this interesting contradiction that they had to tell us we're there to help the Iraqi people, not destroy them, but we need to lift them up from their primitive state because they're all subhumans.
Yeah.
And, Dune coons, sand niggers, Haji was the common term. And it's really sad when you think about this. And I step back and look at the bigger picture every chance I get. And we are actually living in the most peaceful times in human history right now, where you as an individual are less likely to be subject to violence at the hands of another human being than ever before. That's a beautiful, amazing thing to step back and appreciate.
Yeah. It's a good thing to remember too, because it's easy to get real negative when you're starting to look at all this stuff.
Well, I in our book Freedom, which we're on tour promoting, you can see in chapter 10 how the progress towards a free society is inevitable because of the connectedness, because racism is on the decline, because what that requires, statism, I mean, even the enforcement of gun control, and this is what I mean, the connection that you hit on of gun control and foreign policy is it's based on fear. You have to fear other people. You know, and they make you fear other people so that they can control you. They make artificial divides between people so that you see others as outsiders. And when you get past that, and this is such an important part of human evolution, because we are seeing this massive awakening going on right now with the internet. Just, you cannot get away with what you used to be able to get away with as government. And I say this as a participant of the global war on terror, as horrific as it has been. And I tortured people in Fallujah. That was part of what I did. Not as a regular duty, but I did that. I was called to help on some situations dealing with detainees, and I aided in taunting and sleep deprivation with guys that were zip tied and had sandbags over their heads and were sitting in piles of their own excrement.
Yeah.
And I also had the nice fortune of being tortured by this government, which puts me in a small club of having tortured on behalf of and been
That's
tortured
only
by
fair,
this
right?
government. Right? Yeah. I'm like, when I went to jail the first 3 days because I refused to cooperate with fingerprinting, they if you saw the picture of me in my mugshot there in the red shirt, I'm handcuffed to a wheelchair. I told them I will not assist in this process, but I will not resist in any way. And so they handcuffed me to a wheelchair and wheeled me out and then fingerprinted me. I was like, fine, can you feed me now? So I went 3 days and had like 3 bologna sandwiches in a room with no mattress and the light on 24 hours a day and it being too cold to sleep. Anyway, my point of all this to get back to the bigger point is that even as horrific and as massive as the global war on terror is in the scope of its tragedy, and not on the American side, not in a few thousand American service members dead, I mean in the at least hundreds of thousands of people in the Middle East who have lost their lives as a result of these occupations and invasions. It still is not nearly as bad as World War I, World War II, Vietnam, Korea. Just the scale of it is so much smaller. And the reason is in this connected world that we live in, where, you know, the smartphones that we have in our pockets have the computing power that used to take a building to contain and are now connected to every other person on the planet who has one of these.
Yeah.
You cannot dress up millions of gullible young men in silly costumes and have them meet in the middle of a field where none of them live and kill each other because they're wearing different colors.
Yeah.
It's inconceivable. And
It's
yes, I know what that word means.
Yeah, it's starting to make that kind of thing silly. Really.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, okay, you look different, but I mean, before it was easier because if you wanted to talk to someone in another country, it was like a pen pal. That was like a big deal if you had like a pen pal at one
and the
point.
government
But
could come
now-
in and overwhelm with information of those people are evil and they all want you dead.
Yeah, exactly. But now it's like you're on the internet all the time and there's comments on YouTube videos and whatever from people all over the place. You know?
I can just imagine a soldier saying, like, I mean, how long have they been trying to get a war with Iran going? Oh, they want us to go fight Iranians. Let me go call up one of these soldiers on Skype and see how he's doing today. I mean, it's just, you can't get away with it. You really just can't get away with what you used to be able to get away with as government. I'm very encouraged by this.
It's crazy. And it's amazing that, you know, like you think about back to the Civil War, you know, where people, it's the same damn country and some of the people in the same families were fighting against each other and stuff like that. Like, look how.
Yeah. Well, I liked, you know, Major General Smedley Butler, one of the most decorated Marines in military history. Most people, this is the craziest, like, and you know, when you start waking up and you go, wait, they're lying about that too? No, wait, they're lying about that too? No, that too. It was one of those moments for me when I learned about Major General Smedley Butler, because they teach us about him in boot camp and all the great things he did for the military. They didn't tell us that when he got back from World War I and all the banana wars and getting 2 medals of honor, that he wrote a book called War is a Racket, in which he describes himself as a high-class muscle man for big business. War has always been a racket. It has always been counterproductive to human happiness. It has always been poor men dying in rich men's wars. And when we're able to see past that, I mean, it's so sad that today, well, maybe we can talk about this and have a little more productive conversation for your audience, and that we see a shift in the American culture, which is really exciting to see, because this has been a distinct deficiency for so long, that people have been manipulated by fear and have seen war as this glorious thing. And there's a distinct culture of militarism in America today. You know, the operator, the Chris Kyle. God, by the way, what a terrible liar. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Don't get me started on Chris Kyle, but the hardcore Chris Kyle fanboys who think that it's defending your country to go kill people on the other side of the planet. it's just the lack of perspective is insane, but it is shifting, and it is really beautiful to see that even today, the kinds of people that we have coming out to our events on the tour.
That's cool. Well, I think a lot of it is because people are going around all the institutions now.
Yeah.
Like everything is in the past has been through this filter through institutions. It's like you talk to this institution, that institution talks to another one, and then tells you what they want you to know about it. But now it's like one-on-one. We can have
Google that.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. We can go direct to the information. We can go direct to the people we want to talk to in the other countries. There's even translators now, so it's not even the same language barrier that there used to be. So it's like how long is this silly costume war, like you said, talking about, how long is that going to happen? Because the wars are not fought by, they are fought by the people, but the people don't necessarily really want to fight each other. It's like they would probably get along, like two people that both, you've got a Iraqi, a soldier that you're fighting against in the Iraq War, and an American. It's like they both might like playing video games. They might watch the same TV.
They have more in common with each other than the people who are sending them to war, than the rich banksters and war profiteers and the politicians who profit from them fighting each other.
And it's a really weird situation, where you're shooting some guy that's over there. You don't know who he is. You don't know if he likes you or not.
He's on the other side of the government line.
Yeah, there's never been a real conflict between the two of you, but because of duty and propaganda, whether some of it's real or not, all of a sudden you gotta fight against this guy. And what's weird too is lately, the attacks on America have been by small groups of people. Like no country has attacked us.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It doesn't make any sense.
The greatest threats to freedom are cops and soldiers. They are, in fact, the only real threats to freedom, because if you don't have an enforcement class, and that's who they are, of people who are willing to do violence against peaceful people, government cannot exist. And they need that disconnect. They need that dehumanization of the enemy in war. They need that legal justification for cops to think that they're special, to give them that legal clearance that, you're not accountable for your actions. You don't, the law doesn't really apply to you. And you're better than the common citizen because you've gone through this training and you are the righteous, the righteous, long arm of the law. And as people are, and this is also changing the relationship between police and their communities. And I don't mean to deny that either cops or soldiers provide at their core legitimate services of providing protection and safety. But when you don't have a choice, like a free market choice of who you go to for those services, they're no longer services. They're rackets that are imposed on you.
That's a good point.
But what's changing, even at the individual level, I mean, again, just the presence of this technology, that everybody now has a video camera in their pockets that's hooked up to the internet. And I see this just every time someone gets pulled over. I do this. I know a lot of people are doing this now too. If you're just hanging out and a cop's bugging someone, at least get it on film. And that is totally changing that relationship, because cops realize, oh, wait a second, the government creating this disconnectedness in my head from the people that I'm supposed to be protecting and serving no longer exists, because this camera is providing a direct connection of accountability for my actions, and I'm now part of the community on the same level as everybody else.
And it can be a double-edged sword too. This is one thing I try to remind people of. It's like technology is going to be amazing for us, but
it is already.
It is already. But it's right now. It's a big time double-edged sword, and we have to it's like our society and culture is in this birthing process almost. It's like things are really rough right now and turbulent because they're changing so much. Like, for example, the negative of what you just said is that because cops are on camera all the time, now it has that same effect of how the news used to make everyone afraid of plane crashes. Right, because you get on the news and you hear about planes crashing.
And now it's bad cop porn.
Well, yeah, exactly. So you think that if you get on a plane, it might crash, when in reality that basically never happens.
You're more likely to die driving to the airport.
Right, but it's in your head more because you see it. Like the news is the culmination of all the bad that happens everywhere in the entire planet, and you see it all where normally that wouldn't have ever happened before TV. So it's the same thing with cops. I mean, cops are having a real hard time right now in this country, and there's obviously bad cops, but there's a lot of good ones too. I've had a lot of positive interactions with police officers over the years.
Well, to be fair about to the good cops, it is the bad cops that make the other 5% look bad, right. And I say that deliberately. I think you'd be really hard pressed to say that more than 5% of the cops out there are genuinely good cops, because good cops are forced out of the force, because bad cops are the ones that protect the really bad ones, and they're all part of a system that provides that shelter for cops to do bad things. There are very few cops who can say that they've honestly stood up against every corruption that they've run into in their own departments, because those that do get kicked out pretty quick.
Well, I see your point. Guilt by association.
It's not guilt by association. That would be saying that there are zero good cops. I think there are a few, but even someone who is well-intentioned, who says, well, I am going to be a part of the system that protects bad cops, that protects corruption, that when you sign up to be a cop, you sign up to enforce victimless crime laws in the first place. So you're already signing up to take a paycheck to be an enemy of freedom.
But it's still kind of a good with the bad kind of situation, because if you know that you're an honorable person and you look at the problems in policing and the laws and stuff like that, maybe you don't agree with a lot of the laws that are out there. Wouldn't it, if you know that you're a good person, wouldn't you rather be the guy that's handling the situations versus some other guy that might be a cop because he's on a power trip or something? I mean, it's
the thing is, every cop I've ever heard of that went in with that mentality, and I've interviewed a handful of them myself who have come out after various incidents, who go, I thought that I could join the mafia and reform it from the inside, and I was wrong.
It's tough. I mean, my interactions with cops, other than just like getting pulled over for random things and stuff, like I used to work security in Section 8 housing, and we like dealt with them a lot, and there were those guys. They were on a power trip, and I'll tell you, a lot of the guys that were on a power trip, and there's nothing at all against veterans, but sometimes
I get
veterans who come who get into police work
are the worst.
It can be a recipe for disaster.
Oh yeah,
and sometimes those guys were the worst. But there was also a lot of really cool cops. They would come out there. They were just trying to do a job. You could tell they just wanted to get home. Yeah. I mean,
hold on. Even then, I mean, just to apply the same moral standard, I was just doing my job. I was just following orders. Is that really an excuse for, with your blood and sweat and tears every single day and your labor going in to support a system that is taking away people's freedoms, that is violating innocent people?
I mean, it's true that police officers can be involved in ruining people's lives, upholding cultural standards. Like, it's true that
not even you're making excuses. Cultural standards as determined by politicians in Washington D.C. I don't think so.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm not saying that those cultural standards are good. I'm saying that
those aren't cultural standards.
I'm saying
those laws are the result of bribery.
What I'm saying, but those laws are held up by culture, though. Is what I'm saying.
Nope.
Like drug laws, gambling, prostitution, all that stuff is cultural, I think. Because the reason that people don't like it in a nutshell is because they have a cultural problem with it. Because there's
they want to and cops at best are then the enforcement of people's preferences on others. But just look at marijuana. Like, for how long have the people of the United States, as a majority, said, locking people up for smoking a plant, probably a bad idea, and yet it's been years since they've come to that opinion shift, as shown by polls of likely voters, and yet the drug war continues. And even in states where the voters, then you say it's a cultural norm, where the culture has changed and the culture has said we want people to be able to smoke pot recreationally in accordance with our norms of safety and public decency, that you don't smoke around kids and you don't smoke in public, and yet the federal government sends in federal cops to bust dispensaries.
But there are still a lot of people who agree with that, is the thing. I mean, every now and then I run into them, and there's a lot of people on the far right, in the far right leanings, that they think
that hate freedom that much.
They don't like those kinds of things. They have a cultural problem with it. They grew up thinking those things are bad. They don't look at it as a freedom thing.
I don't mean to just be a contrarian here, but again, you say they grew up thinking those things. No, they didn't. They were told those things, and they were told not to think, and so they didn't.
Well, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, you grow up thinking a certain thing. Like, I guarantee you that there is something right now that both of us think is wrong, and it's probably culture, and we don't even realize it yet.
Oh, of course.
So it's the same kind of thing.
I hope I'm just not saying but as a contrarian. And maybe we can conclude this course of the conversation here to say that the point of waking up is when you say, okay, whatever my conditioning is, whatever my preferences are, I refuse to support or to participate in forcing those on other people. And that's the awakening. That's the critical awakening. And I got to say, as much as I've pointed out problems with modern American conservatism, because we're talking about with a gun culture audience here, I obviously I could say worse things about the left and every other form of statism out there, but right now there is a beautiful shift of people who are getting that, who are stopping, and it is because of the internet again that you can just look up whatever you want. We have the luxury of addressing every cognitive dissonance that is raised. And maybe to bring this back full circle to activism, if you want to talk about some of the other stuff that I've done that have pissed off various demographic segments one at a time, it's all the more reason to support activists who, whether you agree with what they're doing or not, are challenging how people think, because it's in having the way that you think challenged that results in a greater level of awareness. And like the Jefferson Dance Party, when I was arrested for dancing at the Jefferson Memorial, a lot of people said, wait a second, when they make it illegal to dance, it means that this is going to happen if you dance? Really? You're going to get... Yes! That's been my point the whole time. If you get arrested, when the government says this is illegal, it means that if you do it, men with guns will come and forcibly take you away from whatever you're doing and lock you in a cage for whatever time the government says is appropriate for you to be held in a cage. And that raised a cognitive dissonance with a lot of people. I mean, even the firearms thing, like I said, when I went to the Million Moms for Gun Control march with a sign that said, I'm a gun owner, let's talk. And on the other side, how will you take my guns away? And I asked people this question, and this is the best one for gun owners, if they're willing to get philosophical with people, is to ask a liberal or any advocate of gun control, okay, I'm a gun owner, I have guns, how are you going to take my guns away?
With guns.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So you're not really for gun control. You just want to control guns to the point so that only the really violent people calling themselves government get to have guns.
Yeah, exactly. They don't want to get rid of guns. They just want only guns in the hands of people wearing uniforms. That's it.
Yep. That's the scariest.
Yeah. That's
scenario.
the thing I always tell people. Guns are here to stay. Like once something is invented, once the idea gets into someone's head, it's around. It's going to be here. Unless, like, if somehow you have some magical way to literally make all guns disappear in the entire world and make everyone forget about the concept of it, okay, maybe I will take your argument seriously. But if there's any guns that can be gotten in the hands of people who would have ill will, then I want to also have one to defend myself against that person. I mean, it's literally as simple as that. And it's frustrating that people still go along with this idea that they trust their safety to a statistic, right? Like, if we reduce the amount of guns in this country, then we reduce the amount of violence in this country. Really? So you're going to bet your life on a stat? Let's say even that was even true, which I don't think that it was, but let's say it is true that if you reduce the number of guns, reduce the violence. Like, what about your family and your house?
I think the test case of England disproves that pretty well.
Yeah. I don't think that's true. But even if it was, what I'm saying is, a stat is not going to save you personally.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? It's like, even if it's less often, do you want to be that one guy where it happens? You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's crazy. It doesn't make any sense. And also this idea that people are not intelligent enough to be able to handle something dangerous. Yes, guns are dangerous. They're weapons. That's the whole point of them. But guess what? So are cars.
Yep.
I mean, you could kill just as many people with a car, really, if it was done in the right way, that you could with a gun, and everyone drives cars. 16-year-olds drive cars, it's crazy.
Well, I don't know. Some places, 14-year-olds even get away with
man.
it. Oh my gosh. Wielding deadly weapons.
Yeah.
You also hit on something so important there, that it is dependent, like all of these mechanisms of control, statism itself, the idea that we should control each other with coercion, with government guns or collectivized force somehow, requires a negative view of humanity.
Yeah.
It requires people to really hate their neighbors. Yeah. You really have to have at some level some form of hatred and disdain. You know, and I don't mean to call out all the religious conservatives listening necessarily, but I just saw the greatest meme on Instagram today. It was Jesus, you know, talking to a flock of followers, and someone's asking him a question. He says, "Love one another," and then the guy questioning it says, "What if they're undocumented?"
Yeah,
and Jesus comes back, "Did I stutter?" It's like, no, it's really simple. Love one another, respect each other. Have that basic acknowledgement of our shared humanity. And whenever you compromise that, and we've been so conditioned to compromise that in how we view each other through government propaganda, that we really forget the universality of the human condition, the beauty of being in a conscious human mind. And we talked about earlier, you had a different definition of freedom or another way of looking at it. What occurred to me when I was in jail really reminded me of my time when I was in Fallujah. And when I was in Fallujah, in the Marines, they teach you the whistle past the graveyard sense of humor, you know? So I woke up every morning as the guy on my team singing songs, telling jokes and stories, and getting everybody in a good mood. And there's that state of engagement that a person enjoys when they feel that their passions and their talents are all focused on some righteous cause. And I had that when I was in Iraq, but I had that in a better sense when I was in jail for civil disobedience. And I told every guard that I could. And when you're the one who's calling on the jail phone to your producer to record podcasts, and they all wear name tags, they kind of listen to you, or at least you know they follow the rules around you. So anytime I had a chance, I'd say, "Hey, excuse me, sir, can I talk to you? I need to tell you something." I get the guard to come up to my cell door, and I would say, "You're a free, beautiful, independent human being, and you should never let anyone tell you otherwise. Have a nice day." And some of them loved it, mostly the women, but most of the dudes especially were like, you could see the look on their face like,
don't you tell me what to do.
And it was, how is this guy on the inside of the cage happier than I am on the outside?
Yeah.
And maybe it's because you dress up in a silly costume every day and you work a terrible 9 to 5 and your boss doesn't give a crap about you. I'm in here working for people who love this, who love freedom, who love me, who love what I do. Of course I'm going to be happier. But what I realized was just such a fundamental, beautiful truth of the human experience that you get to choose your demeanor at all times. Every bad day is self-imposed.
And nobody can take that away from you.
Exactly. That's real freedom. And we talk about this in terms of the flip side of government propaganda being negative. They want you to be afraid. They want you to be angry. They want you to be depressed and dependent and have a negative view of humanity and feel that government is this all-savior parental figure. They don't want you to respect your own will. We talk about this in political philosophy and libertarianism as I want your will to be respected. I want no one to use violence or coercion against you in any form. I want you to be able to flourish. But we don't do it to ourselves. We do the opposite in our own heads, and we're conditioned from birth, by our parents, by our teachers, by police, government, authority figures, whatever they may be in our life, to subvert ourselves, to not respect our own will. And when you really have this true personal freedom, and this is what made me want to start writing the book, actually, it totally changes your engagement towards activism, towards government, towards the world. When you can be happy, when you can put a smile on your face with a boot heel on your neck, and you can look up at that guy and be happy, there's no more hatred. There's no more disdain. There's no more anger. Maybe empathy, pity. You want to lift that person up, because the cop who beats up protesters, and I'm talking about the guy at the Capitol in Austin who took a guy who was open carrying him and broke his ribs on the sidewalk because he didn't like the fact that he had a rifle slung over his back and was standing up to his authority. The cop who beats up protesters is not a well-adjusted human being who goes home to a happy, loving household. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The politicians who pass these laws, who lie through their teeth every day, who understand, they know what they're doing.
Yeah, I don't buy into this whole ignorant politician thing,
No,
especially when
of
it comes
course
to
not.
guns.
They know all the effects.
Yeah.
When they play dumb and give you the other side's talking points, you know what they're doing. But the bankers, and you mentioned this before we started talking on the record here about how central to the entire racket of government is the monetary system,
right?
And that it's hard for people to wrap their heads around. But when you understand how you're forced into a system that allows someone else to just print money out of thin air, but the bankers who are behind the wars, who are behind the NSA and the surveillance state, who are behind the police state, and who buy all of our politicians, right? George Carlin said that trying to make yourself happy with money is like trying to satisfy your hunger by taping sandwiches to your body.
Yeah, it's great.
It doesn't work. These are not happy people. They need the message of freedom more than anybody else. And maybe we're going to have to just drag them kicking along, kicking and screaming into a free society because they're not the ones who are most receptive to this message. But everyone, by virtue of being a human being, is capable of getting this and incorporating it into their life and living freer and happier as a result.
Yeah.
And when you can share that, and I feel like this is the evolution in my activism. I've always valued civil disobedience. I've always valued, the headline grabbing, sensational, grab you by the collar kind of activism that raises cognitive dissonance, that challenges how people think. It works. It's a great gateway. But now what I'm really able to do with sharing the book and talking to people like this, and we're doing speeches all over the country. We're on the road for 6 months. It's going to be like 150 stops in 170 days. Pretty intense tour. Living out of an RV trailer with my amazing girlfriend. And she drives, so my liability stays pretty low, which is very nice.
It's a pretty nice advertisement, too.
Oh, yeah. We got a little 19-foot travel trailer with the giant Freedom logo on it. And
all the neighbors are probably like, what the hell?
So it's getting to share this is so much more powerful and so much more satisfying. So if I may commandeer the show for just a minute, we've been issuing a challenge to everybody that we meet on the road to read the book and then to decide for themselves if it's not the most efficient way to take someone from zero to I get it, to find out what is for yourself and then do that, because I guarantee that's what you're going to find the most satisfying. There are a lot of activists who waste their time, who are frustrated, and the best activism, or excuse me, the best feedback I ever got from the book was from an activist in Texas, and she called me up after reading it and she said, you, Adam, I can't do my activism because I'm not angry anymore. And I was like, yes. So you're going to find something better now. You're going to find something loving and compassionate that lifts people up, that wins converts to a different way of thinking. And I'll tell you this, you might not agree with my exact perspective, but you can't help read this book. And it's 100 pages. It's a free audiobook, free in every digital format possible online that you could want. We sell them very cheap on our website at thefreedomline.com. You cannot read this book and not at least come to as divergent from the mainstream a worldview. And it has incredible value in forcing people to confront a lot of these fundamental philosophical issues of the nature of government, the nature of power, and the nature of freedom. But again, I want to bring people together. Everybody who is willing to move humanity forward in the direction of freedom in whatever way it is. If you're a lefty or a conservative or whatever it is, but you understand that central authority is a problem, that people controlling each other with violence is a problem, then I encourage you to accept the same standard of your activism that I've imposed on myself, which is to measure how many converts are you winning to a different way of thinking. And when you have a truth that brings you down, that makes you afraid, that makes you angry, and you go out and try to share that with people, you're not going to have very good results.
Yeah, you're hurting the cause for sure.
But if you find a way that it's made your life better, and you go out with people in a positive way to share this, and you say, look, this has allowed me to be happier, to live more free. Can I share this with you? You never get someone going, oh, I don't know, live free and happy. I don't know. Who's going to build the roads? You just don't get objections like that because you're meeting people's needs. Everybody wants that. Everybody wants that internal freedom. And just, John, I'm so grateful for the opportunity to address your audience and talk to a different group of people than we might normally get to. But
no, I appreciate you coming on, man.
Everybody wants this. Everybody needs to hear this. Yeah. Everybody gets freedom at some fundamental level and can live more free.
Yeah, there's not enough positivity in the world right now. Like my kind of journey of waking up, whatever you want to call it, just being more aware of of what's going on, trying to find my own truth. Started with watching some of people like Alex Jones. And then I kind of grew out of it, to be honest. I got to where, this guy,
it's a lot of fear.
It's all about fear.
Yeah.
And then I started to pick up on the fact that there was, in this universe of people who were trying to tell people what's going on, there seems like a very clear dividing philosophical line between them. And it was people who promote fear and then people who promote just positivity.
Love.
Right, exactly.
Connectedness. You really want freedom? Like, I don't care if you want it in your bubble. If that's your definition of freedom, it takes love and connectedness for your freedom to be respected.
Yeah, cooperation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, not fear. Because that, it seems like to me, is the ultimate goal. That's the whole point of propaganda, is fear. Is to make people afraid. Because when you're afraid, your judgment is clouded. You're more likely to trust things that you normally wouldn't. You're more likely to, feel like you need to rely on government. And that's ultimately what they want, I think. And when it comes to gun control, more specifically, this is something that a lot of people argue about. And I also went through kind of I went through a time where I thought different things about the real reason why people are wanting to take our guns. At first it seems like, these ignorant politicians, they just don't understand. All right,
and then you get over that real fast.
Yeah,
you go, no, wait a second. There's no way they're that dumb.
Exactly. Like they just don't understand. Then you're like, no, that doesn't make sense. And then I was like, well, okay, maybe it's because they're afraid that there's going to be a revolution or something like that. And then I started to realize, no, they're not afraid of that. They know that that's probably not going to happen because they're smart enough to avoid that from happening. The real reason is because it's the same reason the government does most of the things that they do. They want to have a monopoly on defense.
Yep.
They want to have a defense monopoly. Like right now, if we have guns, we can have most of the guns that exist. We're allowed to have.
But they don't want you to organize into an actual functional militia that would challenge their monopoly when you can say, we defend our community better than you do at a lower price.
Yeah, or even on a personal level.
We want you to call the cops. Please call the cops. Whatever you do, don't defend yourself. Right. They'll come and fill out a report after you get killed.
And the thing is,
fine.
Cops can't even defend you, even if you wanted them to. That's not what they do. They're basically administrators.
Yep.
They show up, they take notes, they find out what happened, and then they send it off to the judge, and you're in court. I mean, it's like,
if you really believe in the free market, you have to know that we can figure out something better than these so-called services we're being provided.
Yeah, exactly. And my opinions on cops, I think, differ from yours. I think cops are important. I think we need cops. If only 5% of the cops are good and we got rid of all of those cops except for good ones, I think we would be, in a tough spot.
Well, hold on. We might be I think we can clear this up with a little semantic clarification.
Okay.
because I'll bet you would prefer. I mean, if you had the choice, if you're living in a community, you had two communities to choose from,
right,
where you could live. One of them says, no, we have a city government that hires a police force that does what our city council says all the time, and you just have to deal with it. Versus, oh no, we don't have a central police force in our community. We allow people to choose their own defense services. You can put up a different sign in your yard, like a security sign, like you would have for an alarm system today, that says who protects you, and we don't tax you for this. You decide for yourself what level of protection you want. But because people in our town are conscious and aware, we have a very good level of protection that generally extends to everybody, doesn't enforce victimless crimes, and provides a better system of accountability when there are bad cops and people who screw up. See, I would bet 1,000,000 to 1 you would choose that second community where you have a say in what defense and protection services you get. And the semantic solution here is, I would say, those aren't cops. Those are private security contractors.
Right.
We need the services. We need people who are willing to take risks to protect each other. But when they're not working for government, when they're not enforcing victimless crime laws, when they're actually responding to the needs of the market and the community, they're not cops anymore. They're actual civil servants. They're actual service providers. They're security. They're just, it's not hard. Like, we have words for this that are better than cops, right?
Yeah.
Service providers, security personnel, private security, whatever the case may be, insurance companies even, dispute resolution services, all sorts of different things are handled so much better by the free market than by a central monopoly.
And I think some variation of that could work. And I actually started thinking about that back when I used to work security, because I started to notice that, so we worked closely in in the Section 8 community, like I mentioned, and we were there all the time. We were walking around, talking to people. We got to know people. We knew who the people that were cool were. We knew who the people that were problems were, and they would give us information. The one way we operated was we kind of left alone, like there was a bunch of big time drug dealers that lived there, and they were really cool with us because we knew that they weren't going to cause any problems in that community.
They were providing legitimate services that the people wanted to consume.
Well, yeah, but they also, like, we were worried about violence, like stopping people from getting robbed, shot,
right,
stuff like that. Like, that place was notorious. There was no shootings while I was there, as far as like people shooting back at each other. There's people that fired off guns, of course, but that place was notorious though for that kind of thing happening. And people would all the time, they would thank us, like, we can bring our kids outside now, and let them play, and so it's amazing, And that was such a good feeling, that I got from doing that. But then you would have, now some of the cops were, pretty reasonable, but you have some of the cops come in, and there was just such a distance
because the institution behind them.
Right, they saw any of those people out there, and they looked at them all the same. Not now, I'm not speaking for every cop, but a lot of them, they kind of saw everybody as the same. But we were closely related to them. We were out there all the time. We knew the different. We saw them as very different people. Like, these guys are okay. These guys might not be. This guy is definitely not okay. So the problem is, it's like, the whole community policing thing and stuff like that. Like, community policing is pretty important, because you can't possibly know how to deal with a certain environment unless you truly know that environment.
You can't provide a service to customers that you don't know anything about.
Right. If you're always in your car just passing through.
And in what other security situation do we force people to pay to have people sit around and stand around most of the day doing very little productive work? I mean, the inefficiency.
Yeah.
When you look at, like, as you say, we need cops, and I would say, well, no, we need these specific services.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, more private security, I think that could work. I think.
In what scenario? And it's funny to hear conservatives who say they believe in the free market, like, not see this hugely obvious thing right in front of all of us, that for the whatever legitimate services government cops provide, they do so incredibly inefficiently, just like everything else government does.
Yeah. And then you have, and it gets tricky though, because then when you get into like private prisons, for example, it almost seems like the opposite of what you would expect is happening with that situation.
Well, now I have a feeling that the real social engineers at the top of the pile here, they go, oh yeah, we'll have private prisons. And they're not private prisons. Because if you have a private prison that is working for a government contract, they might as well be a government agency. You're socializing the costs and privatizing the profits. It's not serving the needs of the market when you say private prison, but it's supported by government. So I have a feeling that they have no problem with this. Yeah, we'll have private prisons. We'll make everybody hate private prisons, and then they'll go, government prisons are better. And it's like, no. You have to do it properly from the beginning. It's like if you say, well, we have private doctors under Obamacare. None of them are government employees. Well, Obamacare can't be bad then.
Yeah, that's true. Sometimes BS. Private is not really private. Yeah,
exactly. Well, you change the terrain underneath a private operation and you make it completely supported by government, then it's worse. It's worse. It's fascism. The definition, as Mussolini said, the merging of corporations and state.
Yeah. And one thing I talked about in the last show was these, this has been a big deal in the gun community lately, is these the president's executive powers, which aren't even really necessarily even hardly mentioned in the Constitution. They've picked out a few places where they kind of say, I mean, it's pretty gray. It's a pretty gray area kind of thing, as I'm sure you know. And they're
signing statements.
Yeah, and they're using, Obama's been using executive powers to try to, ban certain aspects of guns. Like there's been this ITAR thing. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. Yeah, where it's really tricky, because when you actually get down and read the document, it's kind of like, it's real vague, but the NRA put out this thing, which I don't always trust the NRA, but they put out this thing about how now the government's gonna ban the discussion of firearms on the internet, and it's got everybody freaked out and all this kind of stuff.
Well, I've seen this with a lot of organizations, and it's kind of sad as just a feature of the way Americans engage. I mean, even Ron Paul's campaign for liberty after his 2008 campaign, I was like, yes, we have a national organization we can all organize under. And then they were like, no, not really. We just want to send out fundraising emails and tell people to call their congressman. And you go, wait, I thought you wanted to have a difference. No, we just want to make money. We just want to take advantage of you.
Yeah.
And the NRA in so many other ways has been running that racket against gun owners for a long time. I mean, it's just as conscientious consumers of firearms activism, if you're going to support an organization, holy crap, at least look into what they're really doing and what difference they're making. And there's so many other better organizations. And I could talk about the people who are doing open carry marches all day. But I mean, even Gun Owners of America is a far better alternative, just for being the honest version of the NRA.
Yeah.
But you need people. You really want to change the culture, the attitude towards guns. You need people like me who are willing to go out and open carry where it's not welcome. You need people who are going to go get in people's faces and challenge the assumptions. You need people like again, Murdoch Pisgatti and Come and Take It in Texas, when they were having all the civil rights demonstrations after white police officers were killing black kids, and of course that's a gross oversimplification from the mainstream media narrative. But when black people were coming out and protesting, and they were getting harassed by cops, they had white gun owners in Texas saying, "Yeah, we stand with you. We're going to protect you." And this is why you should be glad that, just making this point. And you can imagine the scene, and there's some beautiful videos out there of this happening where they said, no, we support your right to demonstrate, and we want to protect you from the police.
Yeah.
Wow.
They those demonstrations that happened, the ones you're talking about, like the whole Black Lives Matter movement, the local cops here actually handled it amazingly well, I think, compared to how some of the others did.
Other departments, yeah.
They actually brought coffee and stuff out to them. They came out there and just brought them water and just supported them. Like,
we're here for the public safety. Yeah.
Yeah, we support you doing this. So, I hate to be too hard on cops sometimes, because the thing is, I was never a cop, but working security, I was closely related to them enough to where I was like, I get how hard this job is, and how unblack and white it is, and how it's a very difficult thing. But I'm with you on the fact that we don't necessarily need a police force in the way that it exists now. I do think that it's some variation of a balance between private security forces and government law enforcement. Something like that blended together could work a lot better.
As a transition, if you understand freedom as nonviolence, right, and this is really important, that and you can say, as a free person, I have the right to defend myself violently, fine. But guess what? If you're defending yourself violently, it means that someone has violated your rights and something got screwed up from the get-go.
Right.
So a truly free society is one of universal nonviolence. And when you're able to see it as that, you also recognize that 90+%, I mean, I might even say 99%, but it's really hard to argue that 90% plus of the violence in the world today, plus if you consider the effect of coercion in terms of the flow of money, if you work for government half the year, maybe you could say that, half of your life is dominated by violence, because if you don't pay taxes, you go to jail, right?
Yeah.
And when you're able to see that, you start to realize that if you were to eliminate government, and you have 90% of that violence go away, and you look at maybe the remaining 10% of interpersonal violence, how much of that is caused by government inadvertently? Like the drug war violence, right? If drugs were legal, you'd be able to sell them peacefully like any other product, like alcohol. Like you don't have gunfights over alcohol. It's a dangerous drug, and it's legal because people are able to trade it openly. So you get rid of government, first of all, you instantly get rid of 90% of the violence. Very soon thereafter, you get rid of another 9% of it, and you're down to 1%. You think we can't handle that better than a government-based system? And a lot of people will raise that as a complaint and say, well, without government, how do we deal with violent criminals? Guess what? We'll figure that out. The free market will provide. We will find ways to come together through. If violence really was reduced to 1% of what it is in the world, private security could handle it far better than government security, which ends up with the other 90% of the violence coming back.
There'd be money to be made. That's
exactly. So
the
the people who complain about this then go like this is your objection to working towards a stateless society. I'm sorry. That's kind of heartless. If you're saying we could end wars for all time, we could end the police state for all time, we could end most of the poverty and pain and discomfort in the world, but we don't know who's going to build the roads. Or there's that 1% of really bad. I'm sorry, you're like a cancer patient complaining that the cure I'm presenting you with might cause you to have a hangnail. And when we're talking about millions of human lives hanging in the balance, I'm sorry, that makes you kind of heartless, at least lacking in perspective. If you say, we need government because of this, because of that, because I can't deal with this hangnail that might bother me in some existential form. We have to have this system that has all of these negative impacts. So I think, again, this is maybe we're jumping ahead, but this is the point of the book, is showing people that not only is a free world inevitable, but that it's something worth working towards deliberately and conscientiously. And I think the solution is localization. We take governments apart from the top down, and we restore power to the states, to the counties, to the cities, and then eventually in a nonviolent way completely back to the communities who respect the rights of individuals. And we have an opportunity here in America We touched on patriotism and collectivism, and then you have to beat people down so that they embrace that collective identity that allows them to be manipulated by government. And there is one thing though that makes me a patriot, that really invokes my distinct love for America. And it's not the borders drawn on a map by politicians in circumstance of history. It's not the documents that actually gave form to the government, which is antithetical to freedom. But the fact that the American Revolution really did represent a step forward for humanity. And the one thing that really draws me to wanting to be American today is that we have the chance to lead the world towards a freer state again, because we have this federal system, because we can say, hey, would we be better off without the federal government entirely than we are with it? And I think that question is going to be posed to the American public in the next few years in a really direct way. And it's going to change people's minds, especially with the internet generation. How old are you? I'm sorry I didn't ask earlier. 27.
Yep.
Heck, you're younger than me. I'm 33. I mean, I just turned 29 for the 5th time. You're not supposed to trust anyone over 30.
That's right.
And there's an awareness. You get this. I say that as a millennial. I'm on the cusp of the millennial generation. You always say that you're with the younger one when that's the case.
That's right, yeah.
that I say that I grew up with the internet.
Yeah.
And I grew up as it was growing up. But you grew up with an even better awareness, just being 6 years behind me here. And just because it's always been that way is not an argument anymore.
Yeah.
The kids that come up with this, and I try to, I'm a kid too, still, barely. But the kids that are raised with this awareness have no tolerance for problems that only exist for lack of access to information.
Yep.
Why should the government work this way? Why should the country be shaped this way? Why should countries exist at all? Why shouldn't we have a nonviolent society? Why can't we find the nonviolent solutions that are going to displace all the violent so-called solutions that people accept these days? That awareness that is shifting. I mean, we are really just starting to realize the impact.
Because, the ultimate goal of living on this planet is pretty damn simple. We think about it, right? We all want to have a very nice, peaceful, subjective experience, have a way to explore the environment, to gain resources, right? Without stepping on other people's necks. That's basically about it when it really comes down to it.
To live happy.
Yeah, to be happy and to be able to explore and to be free in our human bodies to explore and grow and create art and do all these kinds of things.
Absolutely.
So do we really need all these insanely complex systems? I think that we're evolving, and I think that right now we need some of that, I think.
We only need them as long as we think we do.
It's true, but a lot of people think we do right now. So
I'm working on it. We're on a tour. We're talking to thousands of people all over the country. It's a start.
I think it's like one of those things where it's brewing, and if you pull the rug out from under it too fast, it could cause a problem. So it's like we kind of have to.
There has to be a paradigm shift before there is real social change.
Right, exactly. So we kind of have to.
No shortcuts.
Take the good with the bad a little bit in some situations, I think. And,
I don't take any of the bad.
Oh, okay.
That's what they taught me in the Marines. I don't take that from nobody.
Okay. All right. Well, you're going to take none of the bad. But it's like. It's and also understanding that it's complicated too. One thing that kills me is people that get so sure about certain things, like it has to be this way, it can only be that way, that their truth is the only truth. There is no one universal truth. I'm pretty convinced of that. There's no one single universal truth. There's only a collective truth of everyone.
I'm more of an objectivist.
Yeah.
But I get your point.
Yeah.
I get your point and where you're going with that.
Like everybody has to find kind of their own truth in a way.
We have to learn to think for ourselves.
Right.
We are more and more.
Because of the technology.
Exactly. Thinking is becoming easier, at least thinking about what matters when you can just look up whatever you need to find the answer to. It's that cognitive dissonance that we talked about earlier that I think, the kind of civil disobedience, headline grabbing activism is helpful because it invokes that, it challenges you and it goes, wait a second, we in the past, as creatures of of habit. We got to put food on the table before we can consider philosophical issues. Cognitive dissonance. Hey, I don't know why the sky looks different today, but I still got to go kill that animal to feed my family. I'm not really going to worry about predicting the weather. I'm not going to worry about the storm that's coming. But now when I can go, well, hey, let me look up the weather on my phone and see if that storm is going to cause me to be struck by lightning while I'm out hunting. Maybe I'll sit home and eat vegetables today, and not die. That just being able to I mean, that's such a silly, crude example, but when it's, well, gee, why can you get body slammed for dancing? How does government work that? Why can they lock you in a cage for loading a shotgun in Washington, D.C.? Why, when you have no victim to your crime, can they do this and put you away? And for me, the really scary part was being denied bail and backed into a corner with that, because the judge actually compared me to Adam Lanza.
Wow.
For being a gun rights activist who went out to assert his rights. Oh, I must be the guy planning the next school shooting.
Yeah,
and they use that fear. They use that against me.
Yeah.
So
it's like you have to almost step outside, like within the structure of all the systems that we've created, and culturally and economically, all this stuff, all these systems we've created. It's easy to see why. If you're looking at it from a structural perspective, why it's wrong for you to load a shotgun in Washington, D.C., because, it's against the law. Like, these people are in this position and they have said it's against the law because of this and that and all these different things. It's like you have to just got to get around all of that and just look at it. Okay, I'm a human. I live in a society. I am in a city. Like, I have a shotgun. You know what I'm saying? Like,
why does that
guy,
equal go to jail for 4 months?
Yeah, why can that guy over there, because he has a certain uniform, do it, but I can't.
Well, copblock.org has really become an incredible force of an activism organization. And, one of their favorite slogans is, badges don't grant extra rights.
Yeah.
And it's so fundamental to how people look at government to understand that if it really is a representative of the people, it cannot exercise any rights that the people don't have. I don't have a right to come into your house and tell you what you can put in your own body. Why should my government?
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, that's a really good point. Well, all right, before we wrap it up, I know you got places to be. You're on quite the book tour.
Yeah, well, Nashville's been fun so far, but man, I don't know how you deal with the weather.
Oh, yeah.
The humidity here, you can drink the air. It's insane. I couldn't do it.
Yeah, it's insane. And it's funny because I was just out west a couple of weeks ago. I took my wife out to Vegas, and coming back, it's just like I've been swimming,
It's like a sauna out here.
Yeah, it's insane. All right, well, one thing I got to ask you about to close on a lighter note is because everybody knows, listen to my show, I'm a pretty big fan of Joe Rogan's podcast. Mm-hmm. I know you were on there.
Yep.
So I was going to ask you, like, what was that like? Was that pretty cool? And to get to meet him and like, what was that experience like and everything?
Joe Rogan's a blast. He's a guy who knows what he's doing. He has a great inherent sense of humor, so he's just a fun guy to be around. But I've been saying this in speeches, and I actually stopped using his name. But he told me, well, someone asked me in an interview in Texas a couple weeks ago, who's the coolest famous person you've gotten to hang out with? Because I had a TV show for a while, I had a radio show for a while. I've been doing, it just with a successful YouTube channel opens a lot of doors.
Yeah.
And Joe Rogan was the one who said this. He said the best part about being famous is getting to hang out with other famous people.
Yeah.
But there's a problem with this, because most people in America who are famous for bullshit reasons.
Yeah.
And what I get to do is I get to hang out with people who are waking up and be a part of that process with people. And everywhere we go on this tour, we meet everyone from fanboys of mine who come up and we're like, oh my God, I watched everything you've ever done and you've radically changed my life. And I'm like, well, if I really changed your life, you probably should stop watching and move on to something else. But thank you. So we get guys from that perspective, or who just, I saw one video of yours and that's what led to my transformation and led my awakening, to people who come to my speeches and are hearing about this stuff from the first time. And the most fun, we were in Jacksonville, Florida, and we had half of the patio of a bar with about 50 people. And there were about 20, 30 people on the other half of the bar just there to hang out, or the other half of the patio. And by the end of my talk, they were all listening and came up to get books afterward. And we're like, what's your name again?
Yeah.
So
cool.
Getting to interact with people who are passionately engaged in this process of waking up and being more engaged in the world and increasing their self-awareness, it's better than hanging out with any famous people, and that's what we get to do every day now.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I've gotten to meet some interesting people, just like mostly just people that are in the gun world. Like Arlie Ermy, got to talk to him one time. That was pretty cool.
The gunny.
Yeah, because it was cool because it was. If you try to meet him at like an NRA show or a SHOT Show, you got to stand in an insanely
in a
long
line and take a picture, and
But we were there at this like strictly media event where they like all the companies bring all the new guns out and stuff, and you get to shoot them. And then he was just there, and it was just like, you know, just kind of hanging out or whatever. It's kind of cool to get to talk to him. And my dad said something like something about it's hard work and then having to, you know, stand here and meet so many people all the time and, you know, at these shows or whatever. And he was like, no, it's like hard work's with a shovel is what he said.
Yep.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. But yeah, that's been cool too from my perspective is all these people, you know, I grew up, you know, my dad was a competition shooter, hard, you know, pretty serious into the hobby, you know, and I grew up, you know, with him being my dad and he taught me how to shoot when I was 3 years old. I had fired an Uzi by the time I was 3 years old. Grew up on a shooting range, literally like right outside, you know, the window of my bedroom when I was a kid. So I was pretty engrossed in shooting and everything that goes with it. And I was aware of a lot of these people growing up and stuff. And then now, because of what we're involved in, it's like I get to actually meet them. And it's strange, you know, and what's weird is like you might meet someone that, it's been situations where I've met someone because of that really we were almost like more well known than, but just because like I had seen them a lot or whatever.
I've had that experience. You get that too. It's the nature of being an internet celebrity is that people have a relationship with you whom you've never met before.
It's weird.
But then when it's like crossways.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, for me, I mean, I don't have any delusions about my own. I hate even the word celebrity, but my own level of notoriety. You know, I go around and I'll meet an activist and I'm like, I'll fanboy out on them. Someone who's just like, no, I'm just a nobody who did that one video. I'm like, that video was awesome. What are you doing next? And they're like, you're Adam Kokesh. What are you? But it's you see this in taking the internet to IRL and you get to just see the dynamics and there's so much. I mean, also a good thing to close on because this is going to appear on the internet and it's going to have a comment section that is not representative of reality. People ask me, like, you know, you started talking about, you know, the people who hate on me in the gun rights community. You know how many of them I've met in real life?
Probably none.
Zero.
Yeah, we've never met any of our trolls.
Not
before.
a single one. They do not exist in real life. In real life, they come out and they're nice people. I've had people talk trash about me nonstop in comment sections, and I've actually met them in real life and then been like, "Oh, so did you want to raise that issue?" No.
Yeah. There will be people that won't like me anymore just because you came on my show.
Well, they see you and they go, well, I expected you to be shorter. I get the opposite. So they see you. Maybe it's a different shock. But no, I'm grateful that people are having this conversation, and I'm grateful that even like you, someone who doesn't share my exact perspective, is able to say this is an important conversation to have. We can learn from talking to people who are different from us.
Yeah, and I don't like this whole idea of, you know, in the gun community, how some people will say, you know, that guy's bad for the gun community or this guy's good for the gun community, and there's a lot of disagreeing going on, and stuff like that. Like I had a guy on who is another, you know, gun YouTuber that is known for being kind of left wing and he's one of those guys that like you either love him or you hate him, and has a lot of people that really just do not like him, and people got almost mad at me for having him on the show. And it's like, look, I don't care. You know what I'm saying? He has ideas. I have ideas. We were talking. That's it. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it doesn't have to be a big deal. Like we're all just people. Right? It doesn't matter. You know, why should we be afraid of other people's ideas, or why should we hate people just because they have different ideas than us? That's crazy. I don't get that. But there will be people that they won't listen to me anymore because I had you on, or you'll see them in the comments of, oh, I can't believe you had that guy on there. You know, he's a government agent. You know, stuff like that.
And they can go back to never learning anything again for the rest of their lives if that's what they want to do. But you know what? I have a feeling. This. Maybe the last thing we got to put this out as a caveat, because it was the Guardian, the newspaper, recently revealed that in Russia there was a troll house that was exposed as a pro-Putin government troll house where they had hundreds of bloggers and commenters. And we know that the United States Defense Department put out a request for a sock puppet software program that would allow them to comment swarm certain negative counter, and anti-government propaganda. And I've put out videos where, unsubscribed, and you're like, you're still here commenting, like what? And I think a lot of people in the internet audiences will try to manipulate you, and they'll try to shut off people who disagree with them in a lot of these really disingenuous ways. And I'm glad that you're able to look past it, because it would be so easy for me to go in and troll your audience with a bunch of different accounts and control you if you were subject to that fear. If you said, you know what, well, if someone says they're going to unsubscribe, then I'm not going to do this thing that I want to do that I know is working. And I think that a lot of people like you and myself who now have, how long have you been engaged in independent media production?
Well, that and I started Hickok 45 in around 2008,
right? Okay,
2009. It was like the winter. It was like around January of 2009, something like that.
So you've been in a little longer than me, even.
Well, maybe, yeah, but I was never in front of the camera. I was always just the producer guy. Like I did all the filming. We would come up with everything together, ideas, all this kind of stuff, and I was fine with just being behind the scenes because I didn't have a lot of confidence in. And like being able to present myself very well in front of the camera and stuff like that. I've always been kind of a philosophical thinker and stuff, but really just had no interest in getting out there with my opinions and stuff. And as it was growing and growing, finally I kind of realized, maybe I'll give it a shot. So I started kind of getting in. I'm in some of the videos over on the big channel and stuff like that. And then now I have this this separate channel now where I do like gun videos and the podcast and stuff like that. So really like actively out there where people like know who I am, probably only the past like maybe a couple years, something like that.
Well, at least long enough to see past the bullshit so that we can have a conversation like this.
And even when I wasn't in front of the camera, it's like I would see negative comments about something like, hey, that was my idea, that was so I kind of got a taste of that. And eventually it's like you have to realize like the whole reason we're doing this is because we're doing it in a way that we believe, that we think is right, and we're just being ourselves. Right. So if someone has a problem with that, then it's like, well, there's nothing I can change.
That's their problem.
Exactly. There's nothing that I can change because I'm already just being myself. You know what I mean? So, and when people ask me like, how do I get a YouTube channel going and all this kind of stuff, I always tell them, I was like, look, just do what you like to do, because if it's successful, then you'll know how to keep it successful. But if you're just guessing and you're just trying things that you think might work, even if it does work, you won't know how to keep it going because it's not real,
Yeah.
And that's important. But man, I appreciate coming on.
My pleasure. Thefreedomline.com. Thefreedomline.com.
Yeah, there'll be links in the description. So I will definitely get the book and read it.
Free book downloads.
Yeah. I'll get the book, I'll read it. I'll talk all kinds of shit about it on the show.
Excellent.
No, not really.
I dare you to disagree with a single sentence.
Okay. All right. I'll take that challenge.
Good.
No, man, I'm looking forward to reading it. Just from, stuff I've seen from you, you seem to have, like, well, I don't agree with some of your tactics throughout the past. I think a lot of people...
Hey, neither do I.
Yeah, well, there you go.
If you agree with all of your tactics ever, you're probably not growing or challenging yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And there shouldn't ever be a person that you totally agree with. That shouldn't ever happen. You're not being yourself, if that's the case. But I've always had this sense that maybe your heart was in the right place versus like some of the other people that I see on YouTube. They seem like they just want attention and they're just trying to, whatever, to make money or whatever their agenda is. It's always seemed like, even when I didn't agree with you, that your heart was in the right place. You genuinely cared about freedom. And I think that, that's something that everyone should be concerned about, because that's the ultimate goal of humanity, right? Freedom.
Absolutely.
It's not money. It's freedom. That's what we all want.
We're on our way.
Yeah, we are. All right, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on. And who knows, maybe we'll do it again sometime. All right, see you.